Over these past few days, I have been engrossed in reading the book Hostage by Eliza Rabbi. These are his recollections as a survivor who was abducted by Hamas on October 7 and returned to Israel after almost 500 days in captivity. So again, this is a copy of the book. You're welcome to come and have a look afterwards. So I should add that for context, and I promise I can see some younger ones here. I'm not going into too much detail, I promise. But we should note that, for a little bit of background, that Eli's wife and two teenage daughters and one of his brothers were murdered on that terrible day. And for Eli, whilst there was a piece of his soul that knew, he only formally found out once he was back on Israel's soil. Whilst it was published in Hebrew several months ago, and it is the first book by a released hostage, and it quickly became the fastest-selling book in Israeli history, it came out in English exactly on the second anniversary of October 7 by design. It's an astounding memoir of resilience and strength in the most horrendous of circumstances, and that's what we're going to be focusing on a bit. So Eli describes one period of time from early on in his days in the tunnels. For the first month and a half or so, I learned that he was held in a family home. Take that for what you will. And he was held in the tunnels with Hirsch Goldberg Polin and Ori Danino. Those names might sound familiar. For more context, both Hirsch and Ori would later be killed in captivity. So he recounts how one day, as they were eating their pitas that were allocated for their meal, that Ori Danino tells his fellow captives about his family. Whilst he lived a much more secular life, Danino was raised in an ultra-Orthodox family, the son of a rabbinical scholar. Shrabi asks him at the end of their meager meal whether he still remembers the Birkat HaMazon, our prayers after our meals. Of course, Danino replies. Shrabi encourages him to recite it, and Hirsch and himself gather around Ori, and Ori closes his eyes and begins, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hazan et ha'olam kulo betuvo. Blessed are you, Adonai, sovereign of the universe, who in God's goodness provides sustenance to the entire world with grace, with kindness, and with mercy. God gives food to all flesh, for God's kindness is everlasting. It's frankly an absurd scene to imagine. And these three men receiving basically a subsistence diet, allowing themselves to hear and to absorb these words and allowing themselves to let words of prayer and gratitude enter their hearts dozens of feet beneath the ground in the tunnels of Gaza. I reflected on this because sometimes our Torah takes us to absurd places too, and that includes in our parasha this week, Vayetze. Our parasha begins with another absurd scene. It's quite spectacular and majestic and well-known. Jacob, having run away from his family and specifically his brother Esau, after stealing his brother's birthright blessing, needs a place to rest for the night and comes upon a seemingly random place. With no pillow to speak of, he takes a rock from that place upon which to rest his head, and he falls asleep. As he dreams, he has a vision, and this is the part that we know, of a stairway going up towards the skies, with angels or messengers of God ascending and descending this heavenly ladder. Jacob awakes with a start and declares, Yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. Surely God is in this place, and I did not know it. And it continues, Vayira vayomer ma norah hamakom hazeh ein zeh ki im beit ha'elohim v'zeh sha'a hashamayim. Shaken or in awe, Jacob said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and that is the gateway to heaven. Our sages ask, what is the meaning of this statement? What is this place? A modern sage, the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory, writes about this character of Jacob, who also was alone and far from home and in danger. He points out that this word for place, hamakom, is later in the rabbinic era adopted to mean not just like a physical space that we visit or gather in, but becomes another name of God. Therefore, we can interpret this verse to mean that Jacob did not just happen upon a random place, he happened upon God. Rabbi Sachs believes that this is what the character of Jacob comes to teach us, that he is the man who encounters God when he least expects it, when his mind is occupied with other things, and when he is afraid and likely on the brink of despair. Jacob is the one who, in a liminal space in the middle of a journey, discovers that God is in that very same place. He may have lost everything else up until that point, but he does not lose touch with God's presence. From that, he was able to summon the strength to hope and the daring to dream. Far from home, in despair, and in danger, but not alone. Later on in captivity, and indeed for most of his time there, Elisha Rabbi tells us how he is held with 3 other hostages, whose names might sound familiar, or Levi, Elia Cohen, and Alon Ohel, with whom he develops a particularly special fatherly bond, which he describes in detail. Unbelievably, in their most excruciating moments, they try to create these moments of strength, of hope, and of dreaming. Sharabi, who himself leads a secular life, but had a traditional Mizrahi upbringing with one parent who is Yemenite, one who's Moroccan, finds himself finding comfort in these rituals. He finds himself reciting Shema Yisrael continuously, like a mantra. Elia Cohen leads the small group in a shacharit service, a morning service, every day. Having grown up observant, Elia knows these prayers by rote. The others stand and answer, Amen. And every Friday night, just as Jews all around the world do, they chanted Kiddush, but over water instead of wine. And yes, there's a sidebar here that although water is not halachically permissible for Kiddush, I think we'll make an exception this time. So no matter their sorrows or their pains or their frustrations, they would gather together, the 4 of them, on Friday evening and set it all aside for a moment to sanctify the Shabbat. Elia would hold the cup of water with both hands and read in a quiet, trembling voice, Yom Hashishi vayechulu b'shamayim va'aretz v'chol tzva'am. On the 6th day, the heavens and the earth and all that filled them were completed. Before Kiddush, the men would sing Eshet Chayil, the passage of Proverbs known as a woman of valor, in honor of the women that they'd left behind, their partners, their wives, their mothers, their daughters, their sisters. They would say hamotzi over a slice of pita they'd saved especially for the occasion. And they would share stories and memories with one another of what Shabbat was like at home, the people, the food, the customs. And then they would bring out Shabbat with a makeshift Havdalah on Saturday evening. Elisha Rabbi concludes this poignant chapter of his book by writing, I don't know if I feel God in these moments, but I feel power. I feel a connection to our tradition, to my identity, to my childhood, to my roots. It reminds me why I must survive, who I'm surviving for, what I'm surviving for. The 12th century commentator and philosopher Ibn Ezra writes that the meaning of hamakom is that there are places where miracles are witnessed. What astounded me about Elisha Rabbi's book was that even at the gates of hell, when the latter had only brought himself and Ori and Hirsch and Or and Alon and Elia down into the depths, they were able to find or perhaps redefine their relationship to the divine in the most unexpected of ways, in the most unexpected of places. Like our ancestor Jacob, in that liminal space, they were able to still say, God is here and we did not know it. This is, in fact, the most profound of spiritual experiences. This is, in fact, the miracle. Amen, and Shabbat Shalom.